You're all going to get that recording note again. Okay, so good morning and welcome to our fourth Economic Opportunities Analysis Public Advisory Committee meeting. This is a Public Advisory Committee meeting. It is advisory to the City Council for the process of reviewing and eventually adopting our economic opportunities analysis to facilitate a number of things that the city is doing. One of those is obviously to update, to have an EOA to be able to evaluate our employment lands, which could lead to urban growth boundary expansions or other types of activities. Also, just to confirm we have enough industrial land, I should say industrial and commercial land, otherwise known as employment lands, to service the needs of Boardman over the planning horizon, which tends to be out 20 years. I'll just say briefly, I think our planning horizon is shorter than that in Boardman because of the increased growth that we've been having. If that continues, we'll probably be back at this sooner than later. We have established some ground rules for our PAC that I want to share. For those of you who are members of the PAC, this is your opportunity to communicate and participate and ask Brendan questions, ask me questions, ask Andrew questions as our consulting team. And I think I saw Meg on there as well. She's part of our consulting team. But for those of you that are not members of the PAC, my apologies to you. We don't have a clear public comment opportunity on the agenda. If we have time, we can certainly add some public comment at the end. But initially, this is a discussion for staff, the consultants, and our members of the PAC. So welcome. Oh, good. Okay, so we're getting a few people in the room. We will go around and do introductions, and I want everybody to introduce themselves. But again, the participation based on the kind of the ground rules we've established is okay, somebody wanted to come in. No, I don't see them. Stephanie, I might pass you the driver's seat.
Okay.
Just
Is Andy Sullivan on?
Randy said she's in the parking lot, so her note taker is here, but she's
Okay,
not.
so I was gonna say I got an email notification.
Oh, okay.
Looking to take her.
Oh, okay. So, I guess given that kind of brief introduction, Brendan, I do want to do introductions around, but I'll let you kind of kick off the meeting and then we'll do some around the room and around the Zoom intros.
Thank you. That sounds great. So, yeah, I recommend we start with introductions. Since I'm talking, I'll just go ahead and maybe we'll introduce the consultant team on this project. We are consultants. This is the fourth PAC meeting, so we've met most of you, but just a reminder, we are with two firms, Johnson Economics and MIG. My name is Brendan Buckley. I am a project manager with Johnson Economics, and I will turn it over to Andrew to introduce himself.
All right, good morning. My name is Andrew Parrish with MIG. I work with Brendan on projects similar to this, usually doing the land inventory mapping and kind of policy, economic development policy for your comprehensive plan and development code pieces. And I'll hand it over to Meg, who is with me at MIG.
Hi, I'm Meg Grzybowski. I'm helping Andrew, as he mentioned, on some of that policy and code review. Happy to be here today.
Thank you.
Let's just stay on Zoom and we'll work our way around the screen. So I'm going to start in what I am calling the upper left-hand corner. And Michael, that would be you. But your mic is not working. Okay, so thanks for the chat. Michael Kane, Hermiston Herald. For those of you looking at the screen, that would be NEONO. So Randy, move over to you.
Randy Baker, Baker Investment Group.
And then Ryan.
My name is Ryan DeGroff. I work for Business Oregon. We're the state's economic development agency. Thank you.
Great to have you here today, Ryan. Dawn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Hurd. I'm the Eastern Oregon Regional Rep. I cover the 10 most eastern counties in Eastern Oregon and 59 cities. And I'm also on the regional solutions team with Ryan DeGroft. Great to be here.
And Dawn and I are spending far too much time together these days. Let's see, I guess Reed AI and Angie's note taker can't introduce themselves, so let's head over to Omar.
Yes, good morning. Omar Cardenas with AWS.
Thanks, Omar. And then in the room, I'm gonna start at the far end.
Okay, Jennifer Layton, part of the Planning Commission. Debbie Rady, Boardman Foods, Families First, and I am also on the Regional Solutions Committee.
Okay. Yeah.
Sam Irons, Boardman Fire. I'm just here taking notes.
Yes, Chief.
For Chief Hughes, yes.
Yes.
Stephanie Case, Principal Planner for the City of Boardman.
And then again, Carl McLean, planning official for the city of Boardman. So, the first thing on the agenda actually says update on other city planning efforts. Just very, very briefly, we have a number of planning activities that are underway or are about to get underway. In the adoption process now is an update to our transportation system plan. It's had its planning commission hearing. It is scheduled to go before the city council on November 18th. Lots of good work with the TSP, some policy and some code amendments coming out of that as well. And then we are also working on a parks master plan. And this often, I think there's some limited confusion out there about the county's work on the conversion of a concept plan to a master plan for the Heritage Trail. It does go through Boardman, but they're doing their master plan. We're doing our parks master plan. And then there is this activity, the EOA. We hope to be moving to an adoption process soon. Hopefully wrap that up in early 2026. And then we have just finished scoping our housing capacity analysis. And we will be hopefully getting that project kicked off around the 15th of November. We need to work with the consultant to cost that and then execute the agreement. And then once the TSP is adopted, we will also be doing a refinement to the Main Street Interchange Area Management Plan. I feel like I'm missing one, but I don't know what it could be. So that's all of the housing. Oh, I know what I'm missing. I'm missing the conclusion to all that. We will wrap all of this work up with a major update to our comprehensive plan and then a fair number of significant amendments to our development code. So lots happening. And then on the sideline of all of that, we're also doing some significant work in updating our municipal code as well. So just lots of activity, and it's driving lots of work as well. So we're doing our best to keep our city council busy, and our planning commission as well.
One quick question. I get asked quite a bit about stops, lights and signs down by Front Street and that area. Is that what is one of those plans?
Yes.
Addressing that?
So when we get to the refinement for the Main Street Interchange Area Management Plan is when we'll really hone in on the issues around future stoplights and then how to manage not only the interchange, but the streets adjacent to the interchange, at least 2 streets north and 2 streets south. That would be Front and Boardman, and then Front and Oregon Trail.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So Brendan, unless there's any questions on that, I will just bounce it back to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so a ton going on there in Boardman, kind of a bunch of planning happening on parallel tracks. And I will, could you allow me to share my screen, host?
Yep. Steph, can you turn on sharing?
Thank you. So this project is part of that. And as we know, again, this is the 4th meeting of this group. We've been getting together for kind of over the course of this year. And I'm going to pull up a presentation here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Great.
Can you go full screen on it, maybe? Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Does that help? Okay.
Yes.
So this is the agenda for today. Carla already covered the update on the other city planning efforts. We're going to talk about updates to the main EOA report and the kind of some recommended strategies coming out of that. These are changes that were made since our last meeting, but our last meeting we had pretty much a substantial draft forecast and land forecast and so on. We'll go over that again, quick refresher, but then we want to move on to some newer materials. So we have from Andrew and Meg at MIG recommendations for updates to the comprehensive plan and potential development code changes coming out of this effort, and sort of what the findings mean for those documents, because updating those is an important part of this process. And then finally, we're hoping to have some time to change tracks a little bit at the end of the meeting and talk about a specific site in the north part of Boardman, around the cemetery. But we'll get into that. That's land that's owned right now by the cemetery district, but it's much larger than their future needs, and there might be an opportunity there in the north urban renewal area to think a little broader about what might happen with that site. So hopefully we'll have some time to get into that at the end of the meeting. These are the projects Carla was talking about and where this one fits in, the economic opportunities analysis. Here is our schedule, where we're at. So we have again been meeting over the course of the year, getting through the major parts of the process, the jobs forecast and forecast for economic land needs, and then the buildable lands inventory that goes along with that. The point of this project, just to remind you and for new folks, is we are looking at a 20-year demand versus supply for economic and employment lands. So those are lands that are zoned for industrial use or commercial use, office, retail, manufacturing, factories, all those types of things. So those are the zones and lands that we're looking at. And then on the other side, we're coming up with 20-year demand projections, and we're comparing the two. I'll go through all that. So coming out of that, we also have some recommendations and strategies in the report itself, and then more specific recommended updates for the comp plan and code recommendations that are actually going to feed into a later part of all this planning work that's being done. And as we wrap up here, so this is our fourth and final scheduled meeting for the advisory committee. We're hoping to get some feedback and some sign off, hopefully, on where the project is at, so that we can do basically one last round of finalizing these documents. And then it's time to go into the public process with the Planning Commission and City Council to actually adopt reports. So I'm going to do a refresher of where the EOA report itself is coming down in terms of land use and your current land inventory. I will try to do this fairly efficiently, and then at the end we'll have time for any comments or questions you have. But most of this is material that we did talk about last time. Again, this is your employment picture there in Boardman. You currently have 3,500 jobs there in the community. A lot of those are in manufacturing, which includes the food processing. So that's where a lot of your current employment is found, in your industrial lands by the river there in the north part of Boardman. And there are other important industries, including transportation and warehousing and distribution. So a lot of that is also related to those major industries. And then a growing sector is the information sector, and that's where data center jobs fall in. So that's been a very quickly growing sector, not, well, in Boardman as well, but also just in Yuma counties, as you well know. So
Yeah, if you want to mute Brenda.
So then we get into the employment forecast. Again, this is a 20-year forecast, and we start with the baseline that comes out of state statute, and that's simply using the population forecast and saying, okay, we're going to need enough new jobs over the next 20 years to meet our population growth. And so that's gives us a very low baseline of under 1% growth annually for employment in Boardman, but we know that in fact, employment in Boardman has been growing much faster than that. And we also know that between Boardman and industrial and commercial lands and the port, there is much greater employment density and employment center located there in Boardman than even matching your population and the number of working residents you have. So Boardman's in kind of a unique situation that way. Most communities we work in don't have that issue where you've got more jobs than you've got local workforce, but that is what's happening in Boardman. So, but we need, when we go in to do the forecast for 20 years, we can't just, in this case, accept that baseline number because it's much lower than the historic growth you've had. So we need to talk about doing an adjusted forecast, which is what we've done. So the adjusted forecast for the next 20 years calls for 2,300 new jobs in the community. That would be growth of 65% over your current job base. And that growth is would be 2.6% annual. So compounded, that's quite a bit faster growth than that baseline number. But again, the rate since 2010 has been 4% annually. So that 2.6%, while very robust, may also end up being a little conservative. But still, we think it's a strong growth forecast for this period. And as Carla alluded to, even though we're looking at a 20-year period, communities aren't actually waiting 20 years to do this process again. So you'll likely be doing it much sooner. So if the forecast is on the little bit on the conservative side, we can address that going down the road. So in terms of where that job growth is, you see on the right, this is comparing the baseline scenario 1 to that adjusted forecast in scenario 2. And you see that a lot of the forecasted job growth is in that information sector. So that it again includes those data centers, and that's where a lot of this forecasted growth is coming in. Going along with all the data center development is strong growth in construction. And then you have follow-on growth in other sectors that are impacted by all of that new economic activity that data centers bring. A lot of employees, they're bringing a lot of temporary construction work. They're bringing a lot of suppliers and contractors that work with these facilities are now increasingly coming to Morrow County and Umatilla County to take advantage of having that business there. So all of these things grow alongside the growth in data centers. And then we also have forecasted enhanced growth in some of the other sectors that go along with your growing population there in Boardman. So those are going to be things like healthcare, the tourism industry, just general retail, and the things that you're going to need to support that growing population workforce. Those are the job forecasts. We translate those into a need for land. So we look at which sectors these jobs are in, as we just covered. We think about where people in those sectors tend to work, what type of real estate that is. Is it commercially zoned? Is it industrially zoned? Is it a factory? Is it a warehouse? Is it office space? And we convert that into a forecast of land need for all those different types of uses. And so this is our 20-year growth forecast. I've broken out the data centers because they're such a special case in your region. So on the right is the data center demand. In the middle there is your commercial demand and other types of industrial besides data centers. So what we find there in the yellow is there's a forecasted demand for about 40 acres, gross acres of commercial, and about 90 gross acres of other types of industrial land for a total of about 125 gross acres. But then on the data center side, we see much higher demand. And that's because we know that the data centers that have been growing out there in your region they demand large lots for their development. Generally, they're averaging about 125 acres per site. And so what this represents is a forecast of roughly 5 new data center developments in the Boardman area for a total of 625 needed acres. And so what we have is a total of roughly 750 gross acres of need over the next 20 years. Again, most of that, a great share of that is for those large lot data center developments. So the next step is to compare that 20-year demand to the buildable land inventory. We say, okay, this is how much you need over 20 years. How much land is remaining in the urban growth boundary currently to help absorb that future demand that we found. So this is the buildable land inventory. This was completed by Andrew and MIG. I want to give them credit, but I'm going to quickly just review where we ended up with this. So this is focusing in on the commercial and industrial parts of Boardman. So this isn't your entire urban growth boundary, but I kind of wanted to focus in here. So this is showing those parts that are zoned either industrial or commercial. And in green, you've got those lots and parcels that are still vacant. In yellow, you've got those parcels that we call partially vacant. So they have a building or some sort of development on them, but they've got a large enough portion of them that are vacant that you might be able to fill in some other employment uses. And in red, you've got those parcels that are already developed. And some of the cross hatching you see, some of the weird shapes you see on there. So maybe those either floodplain or they are delineated wetlands and things like that further hamper development. So we take those into account. So some of the parcels that show as buildable, but maybe have constraints on part of them, we're subtracting those. Right? Say that a full parcel is not. So this is a summary of what we found. We break it down by the industrial and commercial zones and come up with the net developable acres that are remaining in the inventory. So we've found a total of approaching 300 acres total for both industrial and commercial. And the breakdown is that I don't have the subtotals here. Sorry about that. But the breakdown is, I believe that they're actually, I have those in just a broken down. But the other question is the number and size of lots. So there's two questions here. One is the gross acreage that remains in these zones, kind of bulk acreage, but then we refine that a little bit and we say, okay, what type of are we talking about today? I'm going to match what your future industries and businesses need. So when we look at the size of the remaining sites, we see that the large majority of them are under 5 acres. Many of them are under 1 acre. So for certain types of users, there's not going to be some of the middle size and larger size sites that they need, even if it on paper it shows that we have the gross acreage. So a comparison here of the 20-year demand, which I talked about first, and the buildable land from the inventory shows that the in terms of gross acreage, there is we do find that there is still enough remaining commercial land and industrial land within the inventory to meet the needs of that 20-year demand for commercial space and the 20 demand for users other than data center users. What we find for the data centers is there are no remaining large lot parcels that can accommodate one of these hyperscale data centers of 100 to 150 acres. No more of those in large sites in the inventory. So there is a deficit for all of that land that's needed for those data uses within the urban growth boundary. When we get back to looking at the site sizes and the site need, what we see is that while we do have those gross acres, as mentioned, we don't have some of the sites that we need. Most of the sites are very small. And so what we find is that we could use a couple of mid-sized commercial sites are needed in the community, and on the industrial side, a broader range of sites are still needed. So really, many of those mid-size sites, anywhere from 5 acres up to 30 acres, are needed. One site of 30 to 50 acres, and then all of those very large lot sites for data centers. So again, the finding that there's enough gross acreage does not translate into Boardman having all of the sites they need for the forecasted growth in the industry sectors. This covers some of the same ground. I guess it's also really what it's talking about is the number of sites needed. So if you just look at the summary on the right side, in terms of commercial sites, again, 2 sites needed of maybe 40 total acres. For on the industrial side, 14 sites needed of about 765 total acres. Again, the large bulk of those being the large lot sites for data centers. But it all comes out to a finding of need for about 800 acres for sites that are not currently found within your urban growth boundary. So it's a finding that a significant amount of land is needed outside of your current urban growth boundary, and we'll talk in a minute kind of what that means. But that is sort of the main quantitative takeaway from this study, the simple comparison of supply and demand. So I think I will pause there. Going through a lot of numbers, but I think I'll pause there for just a minute, and I would like any comments or questions the group has to make sure that we understand, you know, sort of make away the quantitative analysis of supply and demand.
Yeah, comment in there. You're breaking out a little bit, Brendan. Maybe if you turn off your video, that might help. But this is the PAC's members opportunity question. So Jennifer, Debbie, Sam, we've got a couple people on the call as well that are PAC members, Don, Brian, Omar. So now's your chance. I'm gonna break the ice. The one question I have is on the commercial side, and thanks for leaving that slide up, Brendan, because you're talking about 2 sites that are in that 20-acre range, plus or minus, for a total of 40 acres. Lots of conversation in the community about wanting a second, maybe larger grocery store. And I think that the big dreams are, my gosh, you know, Costco just built a second site in Richland. Would they ever build one in Boardman? Or would a Fred Meyer ever make a choice again? I mean, I think these are big dreams, but my question for you, Brendan, is that if let's just say a Fred Meyer or a Safeway, or to say, yeah, Boardman is a potential location based on the growth that's happening there. And then looking at it more from a region here, not that I don't regularly see people from Boardman and Hermiston doing their shopping, but if they could do it here, I know they would. So 2 20-acre sites, does that get us a Fred Meyer or a Safeway or maybe a small Walmart? I mean, is that the right size for that kind of commercial activity?
Yeah, great question. So yes, 40 acres is the total. So really we're talking about two sites that are maybe 20 to 30 acres. And those would be sufficient for a big box store or full-size grocery store with a few stores around it.
Okay.
So it's really the kind of big box development that you're familiar with in other cities.
Okay. So I broke the ice, PAC members. Any of you got questions? Debbie, take it away.
So, there's a lot of talk about the data centers in here and big needs for land. There's also a lot of opposition to more data centers in the community. So how do you, I mean, not that maybe this committee isn't in charge of that, but how are you, bringing that forth as something that the community is supportive of? Maybe just louder voices prevailing, but whatever it is, it's out there. And secondly, when I've talked to people on city council and even Brandon, there's been talk about additional industrial type manufacturing or other kinds of things. So it seems like this presentation is primarily focused on data centers. And so I'd like to hear why we're not talking about other things. Not that I'm opposed to data centers. I'm just sharing what I hear in the community and what I've heard in different meetings. So just to get clarification on the industrial part of this.
Sure.
Brendan, you want to take the technical answer and then I'll kind of throw in the city perspective?
Why don't you go ahead, Carl?
Okay, I think on the city side, we decided to undertake this for a couple of reasons, this project and doing an EOA. One, you don't do an urban growth boundary expansion for employment lands without an EOA. So in the state procedure, which both Ryan DeGroff and Don Hurt, who are both in the meeting today, could answer that from the state's perspective. How do we check the boxes to do that piece? So that's part of why we did it. I think it's also for the city kind of a check of, okay, we've got this land, but it's like the Mon property, the 60 acres on the other side of Main Street. We had 60 acres of commercial land. We had an unwilling landowner. There was no movement on that property. And so what it has happened in the court, just in the time that we've been doing these PAC meetings, is I think it was the second PAC meeting, I was able to announce that in that meeting, because that morning, Good Shepherd had made the announcement. And so we're seeing movement. We have been in contact with a party who does have an interest in doing a UGB expansion for industrial purposes. We do not have an application, so I don't have anything I can talk about.
Hmm.
But we know there's interest and they've identified appropriate land. It is not the 600 and some acres that's identified. It would be a portion of that. But I think to answer that, how does the city deal with that? The city's objective is to manage the operation and the resources of the city from a community kind of perspective. And one of those things is tax base. How do we continue to have enough tax base to be able to support the needs of the community? And it's a community that is growing rapidly. And so we've got to look out into a future and figure that out. And while we have some great revenue in this world right now from the enterprise zone projects, that's not a guarantee. That could go away tomorrow. And so I think for the city, it's about managing the inputs and outputs and looking at how industrial land and that tax base associated with that plays a role is important. I think on your comment about how you balance those who are opposed against with those who are for, and then you have to account for probably the greatest majority of people who just live and work here, and some of that is completely ancillary and outside of their even circle of influence or interest, is we have to make sure the development code is right. So while this tells us what our need is, the part that both Andrew and more importantly Meg can speak to, and that'll come in the next two topics that we cover, and the next topic that we cover about the comprehensive plan and development code updates, it's those development code updates that are really important. How do we assure that if we have industrial land that may find itself adjacent to residential land, how do we adequately buffer those residential uses from that industry? Was painting the gray building enough, and putting some color on it? Was that enough? Is there something else that could or should be done relative to how data centers build to make them more community friendly? And I know that a lot of the pushback is not so much about the building, it's more about the services that connect to it. And we have seen, I've worked in planning in Morrow County for 25 years. The landscape has changed a lot in that. But the landscape in Eastern Oregon has changed a lot in that time too. You can't drive from here to Bend and not see the impacts of renewable energy. So it's about understanding that all of this has impacts and all of this has choices that we have to make. I think those are the things that we're looking at is how do we try to find that balance? Should we say no to data centers just because a few don't want them? Or do we find a way to make sure that data centers can be a part of the Boardman community, but do so in such a way that we can acknowledge the tax base and the jobs that they bring and manage and mitigate the negative components of that? I don't know if I hope I'm kind of getting to.
Yes, my just question for this,
Yeah.
presentation, it looks like we're putting all our eggs in data centers. And so if there's a way to say that acreage would be used, and maybe this slide is saying it says industrial, but how you're showcasing it, it appears to the outside that we're just going after data centers. We have these other small acreages for a Fred Meyer's or something, but
Right.
the other industries aren't really included. So that's how it appears.
Well, and we also live immediately adjacent to the East Beach Industrial Park, which is a port facility, and that land has much more variety of things that are out there.
Right.
Yeah, food processing. They tried a tire pyrolysis a number of years ago. There's a number of things that are out there. I think it's interesting. I would find it interesting to do Brendan's job relative to the proximity of the city and the port, because you'll notice we've not analyzed the port. That's the county's role.
Right.
That's outside of our jurisdiction. We don't have. If they were to do this, we could certainly provide comment, but it's not our analysis. I think for me, and those 625 acres.
That just says the port is more involved with the industry.
Right. So
Other industries.
that's yes, that's part of it. That 625 acres though does have it has an asterisk attached to it because this analysis is saying 625 acres for data centers. So, and I'll let Brendan or maybe Ryan speak to the specifics of why this analysis identifies the 625 and why it is specific to data centers. And they can answer that question. So I'll be quiet now, Brendan.
Maybe I can speak just to kind of answer most directly what you're asking about the report. So I know, yes, I have emphasized the data centers in this overview because they represent the most of sort of the acreage need, but I want to emphasize that this analysis in this report talks about all the industry sectors in Boardman and the relative growth and need and multiple target industries and so on. So I definitely want to emphasize that, no, we're not trying to just focus on that. On this slide in particular, you see that we've identified the need for 14 roughly additional industrial sites. 5 of those were the very large sites for data centers. So really the other 9 you see here are sites that are identified for other types of industrial users. They're too small to be useful for data centers. So everything that you see here that is smaller than 50 acres in this case, or roughly 30 acres, those would all be for other types of industrial users. Plus, you have all of the city's remaining buildable land inventory, roughly 150 acres of current sites that you have within the city urban growth boundary. This analysis is saying that those sites will be available to be used as well. So we're definitely not saying that Boardman won't be positioned and have land available for other types of industrial use. So I just
Thank you. I wanted to comment on something Carla said too that I think is really important. I just got back from a trip to Denmark on industrial symbiosis, and it is just beautiful, the construction they're doing in terms of landscaping and lighting, and it really does change the perception of big industrial parks and what they're doing there. They look welcoming and inviting for people, and so there's lessons to be learned there on how we make it look like it's fits into the community and not stands out as a sore thumb. And all of the Port of Morrow could, and I know Lisa Middlestroff, I've talked to her, she was on the tours, like, we can do better in how we say what's required for the aesthetics of our community as we do development.
Right. And I think that's really important for Meg to hear from Meg.
Yeah.
Relative to our development code provisions for employment lands. Historically, our industrial lands have not had a landscaping standard. The port has attempted to do their own kind of entryway beautifications, and I think it's well done. But like, we're having conversations, not to pick on Lamb Weston, but their oldest plant was built at a time when there was no landscaping standard. And so we're basically deferring their landscaping requirement to the east plant, the new plant. And there is some beautiful landscaping around that, but that doesn't help beautify the west plant. And so it is figuring out how we just have to accept what the past has been and then do better in the future. But I think you're right, that whole, how do we landscape around it? How do we figure out how to make it blend into the community? And then I think there's a part where like our Parks Master Plan and the trail stuff that we're talking about can be informative to that as well. How do we assure that we have walking paths or sidewalks? How do we assure that somebody could live in Boardman and bike to work? I think those are really important things going forward too.
I do.
And all of those, so it may not be reflected in this document or in the outcome of this planning activity. But I think when you take it all together, you begin to see the parts and pieces.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great,
I
thank
don't
you.
know. Yeah, Brendan, I don't know. Is there anything that Ryan would choose to add to the conversation?
Ryan?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, Ryan with Business Oregon. Just to clarify, Don is much more an expert on these economic opportunities analyses. I think you probably got the grant from the LCD to do the work, or no, Don's shaking her head. Anyway, these efforts are done to justify urban growth expansion, and that's firmly in DLCD's warehouse or wheelhouse. I will say though, that when I've seen efforts like this done in the past, part of this exercise is projecting future needs. And if you're going to project future needs, it's smart to look at what has happened in recent history and just looking at the Boardman area within your city limits. Much of your growth over the last 10 years has been data centers, and although there are many manufacturers on port property within Boardman city limits, those are kind of some of the originals, like you, Debbie, at Boardman Foods. You guys have been there a long time. Len Weston has been there a long time. So those maybe are not reflected in kind of recent development that might be chewing up more industrial or commercial sites. So really makes sense to me that we'd be taking a big look at bigger lots here, forecasting that there could be future data center growth. So far, really, it makes sense to me. I don't know if Don, if you've got anything to add or not, but.
No, thanks, Ryan. So Ryan's correct. So basically building an EOA, communities like Boardman would research like the economic history and take that data and then formulate what they'd be looking for growth. Boardman did not get a grant from us. They actually are self-funding. But we do provide funding for that at DLCD. One other thing too, and kind of to answer Debbie's question here is, what this EOA is doing, and Brenda can dive a little deeper into it, is what we call a targeted industries analysis. And that targeted industry is, or at least a portion of this includes the data centers. And the one thing with the data centers, or taking that approach and doing the targeted industries, is if you are showing that there is a need for that specific use, that is the use, and you do, it warrants an urban growth boundary expansion, that is the use that will have to go into those areas that are being expanded. So or a modification would have to be made in order for a different use to be considered for those areas. And just to kind of give just a little overview, and I think Carla may have hit this a little earlier, we do have requirements at the state level that each community provide these what we call employment lands, so industrial lands that allow for development so that your community can continue to prosper and grow and provide working or jobs for the community members. But so that having at least a 10-year supply, and that's what Brendan is including in this analysis. We are seeing a huge influx, especially along the I-84 corridor, towards targeted industry of data centers. And I'm just going to be really blunt here. We at DLCD have realized that our framework for Oregon land use and urban growth boundary expansions and EOAs, economic opportunity analysis, we really aren't set up to handle this magnitude of development and expectation that these communities grow with these data centers. So we're kind of playing a catch-up game, but it does fit with the data centers fitting into a targeted industry. And the analysis that Johnson Economics has provided has shown that this is something that could potentially be a development opportunity for Boardman and the other communities along 84.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Ryan. Brendan, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks. Okay. Good discussion. I guess what I'd say is after this, we can continue to take comments and thoughts on that issue of the data centers and how many Boardman might like or conceivably can attract. One thing that we're finding that we discuss in this report and other reports we've done in the region is that right now it's very hard to say that there's a ceiling on demand because the industry is not acting as if there's a ceiling on demand. So there's you get into a little bit of a policy question, community by community, of how much of this type of growth and development you might want to attract. So that's what we've tried to get at through this process and through these meetings, is to determine how much that industry is a target industry in Boardman, but we can always continue to keep taking comments and discussion on that. I do want to move on. I'm watching the time here. I got to get over to Andrew and Meg to talk about their piece. So I want to move on to strategies. So in your packet, the latest draft of the EOA report you have, and basically the final section, the conclusion section, there is a table that starts to discuss economic strategies that can come out of this report. These are sort of recommendations, a lot of next steps type of things. So by adopting this report, the city council will not be committing to these as action items necessarily, but these are approaches or things that the community can consider coming out of this process. So the big ones are, I'm going to, again, because of time, go through these strategies, hopefully fairly quickly. And there's more detail in your report if you're interested in any of them. And then, of course, we can also ask or answer questions. But so what do you need to think about coming out of these findings we just talked about? So one is you need to meet your employment land needs. This is what Don was just referring to. This is kind of the big one. This is a state requirement, and the whole reason that we do this process is the community needs to meet its needs for employment lands going forward. So the big one coming out of this is, does the city want to pursue a UGB, urban growth boundary, swap or expansion to meet these land needs? There's a finding of pretty significant acreage need, and so realistically, the community is probably looking at an expansion of its urban growth boundary. Another option is what's called a swap. So if there's a large section of land in your current urban growth boundary that is not developing, it's not doing what it was envisioned to do, there is the option of removing that from your urban growth boundary and moving land over to somewhere else where it's more likely to develop. Similarly, there's the option of rezoning non-commercial lands. Maybe you've ended up with some residential zone land in a place that it doesn't make much sense. It's not developing, and it would make more sense for that to be either commercial or industrial. Ensure that other plans reflect growth priorities. This is what Boardman is doing right now in terms of all these planning efforts. But basically what that means is if you're looking at expanding the urban growth boundary in one direction or another, is that reflected in your TSP? Is it reflected in your other plans that that's going to be a major new chunk of land that you need to serve? And you're going to need infrastructure out there. Ensure that your available sites that you have are ready. Is there anything limiting the development of the buildable land inventory we've identified? Those sites need to be better served by current infrastructure. And then encouraging infill and redevelopment of sites that are currently within your urban growth boundary. Are there obsolete uses or underdeveloped sites that can be used better to help meet that 20-year land need? Your zoning and development code, this is what Andrew and Meg will be getting into, but basically, does your zoning code meet the needs that you have going forward? A major one is making sure that data centers are properly defined and there are standards established. When a major new industry comes up quickly, as it has in your region, you need to update the code to make sure that it reflects what you want to happen with that industry. And then these are some other aspects of zoning, just making sure that you're allowing what it is you want to allow, and maybe prohibiting or putting conditions on those uses that you don't want to see, or you at least want to have conditions. And finally, the last batch of strategies in the report have to do with business development and workforce development. These are the kinds of things that often cities do with economic development partners. So you've got your educational partners out there, you've got Business Oregon and economic development partners, you've got other government partners at the county, maybe neighboring counties and so on. So these are the kind of things that the city can do to ensure that you're doing the outreach, marketing of economic development. You do have some tools there already, including your enterprise zone and urban renewal that can contribute to new job development if those jobs are particularly attractive and you want to help those developments happen. And then in terms of workforce development, thinking about those connections to training resources and your educational resources you have out there. And then the issues of workforce housing and childcare, which are always very thorny and difficult to deal with. But it's important to remember that those are part of your economic development as well. There is a plan to go ahead with the housing needs analysis, which is the counterpart to what we're doing here, the counterpart that looked at residential lands and housing needs. So hopefully that will be kicking off in the next year or so, and workforce housing will be an important part. So those are a quick overview of the strategies in your report. Were there any questions or comments on those strategies, and anything I can answer about that right now?
I would just say that we're actually kicking the housing capacity analysis off, hopefully around November 15th. So it's slated to start then, and working with the Matt Hasty at MIG, it looks like it would conclude probably by August, plus or minus. And we're going to extend the completion date for our comp plan and development code to make sure that the HCA outcomes are incorporated in that, in particular the comp plan, but also the development code provisions. So we are trying to marry all of these up as best we can. We would have started the HCA sooner, but no disrespect to Miss Dawn there, the state had to rule make. So, but we're getting started soon. So yeah.
Great.
What's
Any
involved?
other?
What's involved with any of this with community input?
So all of these projects have a public advisory committee, and they all have some level of community outreach involved at some point in time, whether it be a joint work session with the council and the planning commission. So lots of community outreach with the TSP and the Parks Master Plan. Less with this one. There'll be probably a little bit more with the HCA. And then there's been a fair amount of outreach. There's been 2 big public outreach efforts with our comprehensive plan and development code. So we are trying to do that, and they all get adopted. So they all go through a public hearings process.
What about coordination with the county and or the Port of Morrow? How much are they involved in understanding what you're doing and how it relates to whatever work they have going on?
Yeah, so we've invited the port to participate in most of the PACs. They are participating in a couple of them. Well, of course, we talk to them about activities pretty regularly. The only plan that specifically requires coordination with the county is actually the TSP, because they co-adopt it because it's applicable in the urban growth boundary. We have coordinated with the county on the Parks Master Plan, again, because they're doing a master planning for the Heritage Trail. And those 2 things do kind of intersect, because the Heritage Trail is in Boardman, but we don't influence the Heritage Trail outside of Boardman. So there's very clear jurisdictional kind of boundaries for that. The EOA has been interesting again, because it will, again, the outcome of one of the utilizations of the EOA is to support an urban growth boundary strategy. But we don't yet have an application for urban growth boundaries expansion for employment lands. We anticipate one, but we do not have an application yet. So we do not have anything to talk about. But when we get to that UGB expansion, that is clearly coordinated with the county. Same thing if we were doing an urban growth boundary expansion or a UGB swap for housing needs. And again, we know we need to figure out how to deal with some housing land needs. Some of that is more driven by the fact that we have a lot of land encumbered by a landowner who is not really interested in
Waiting for something bigger.
well, they're a farmer and they're just gonna keep farming. So we've got to figure out that conversation. That will be coming when we start the HCA. So there is coordination. It's just not necessarily in this moment, if that makes sense.
And does the city have any legal rights, I guess, to be able to do the, I think they call it eminent domain. So there's property in the way of something. And
Right.
you take over, basically say, we're paying you fair market value and we have to do this.
So,
You have that
yep.
authority.
Yeah, a city by its nature has the authority to engage in eminent domain. It's not, eminent domain is not something that any jurisdiction wants to do. But it's a tool in the toolbox. I don't see anything in the near term that where we would choose to pursue that mechanism.
But it is a tool.
It's a tool in the toolbox. If we found we needed something and we couldn't get to a negotiated outcome, that is always an opportunity. But again, that would be more a focus on roads or public infrastructure rather than there is some federal court cases about eminent domain and how you can, and more importantly, how you can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of on that is the electrical power that's needed for the data centers. I've learned quite a bit about, upgrading. It really does enhance the electrical grid. I've heard comments where having a data center takes power from other people and other industries can't come in because of power. But I've learned since that there really is part of that. They're required to upgrade all of the power in the area. So is in this analysis, the land is that included somewhere that it takes for water, sewer, electrical, other things that support those data centers?
Yeah. What I would say is, we have a good working relationship with UEC. We have conversations with them regularly. The conversations tend to be more driven, have historically been driven project by project. I did meet with their new kind of land use administrator at UEC. I guess that was last week. I stopped by, got a tour of the new UEC building, spent about an hour. For those of you who know Brendan Seitz, he's the new kind of land use, he's overseeing that department now. And I was surprised because he reached out and he said, I need to have a better handle on what's happening in Boardman. We had that conversation. So yes, and I think as we get to the potential for UGB expansion or a UGB swap, we would be having that conversation. Of course, we manage the water and wastewater until the port does, and then UEC's the power. But then we also talk to the fiber companies and the rest of them. So again, historically, it's been project by project. Some of those projects are going to get bigger. And I do think we need to gear up to have the bigger conversations with those entities as well. Good questions. You're challenging me, Debbie. I appreciate it.
No problem. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So Brandon, should we bring Meg and Andrew into the conversation?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so the next steps are talking about recommendations for the comprehensive plan, economic chapter, and then development code review. And I'm going to, I just want to say real quickly on the code that we are providing recommendations to other parts of this larger comprehensive planning process. So we don't have a set of specific development code recommendations that would be adopted by the city council at this point. It's more recommendations for the next part of the planning process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and or Meg, whoever wants to jump in here.
Yep, I'll be doing the talking here, and Meg can chime in and answer questions perhaps as needed. But again, yeah, my name is Andrew Parrish with MIG. So like Brendan mentioned, we are providing some amendments to the comprehensive plan that have to do with Chapter 9 economic needs. And these amendments are expected to be adopted as part of the EOA, so the comprehensive plan will actually change. But there are some other development code pieces that are more conceptual and like Brendan mentioned, will be rolled into a future kind of broader development code update. So the comprehensive plan, if you're not too familiar with it, it guides city decision making, it guides work programs, land use applications. It has actual legal basis in the city's decision making. So our recommendations are basically to remove sections that have old, outdated narrative about economic conditions. The last time that the EOA was updated, there's some text in there about 1997. So remove the old stuff and replace it with a concise set of information from the current EOA describing current conditions and where the city wants to go. So in the memo that we prepared, that's pages 1 to 7. And then maybe the more substantive piece is replacing current economic development policies in the comp plan with new goals and new policies. And those are the final 2 pages in that memo. So next slide. So I'm going to go in a little bit of detail on what the new policies are recommended to be. These were, I believe, drafted with consultation with city staff and stakeholders and others, and they kind of are the outgrowth of the implementing actions that Brendan mentioned that came out of the overall EOA. There's a lot of text on these slides, but it's fairly important stuff, and there aren't that many opportunities to get a room full of experts to actually look at and think about these. So the first goal is to support and build on the foundation of existing industry sectors in Boardman. The first policy under there is to manage the urban growth boundary to ensure sufficient employment land as identified in the EOA. So this is kind of a general policy that says when we adopt an EOA, it's the policy of the city to take UGB actions that are consistent with that. And so that's a policy that can be used to say, we do actually need to amend the UGB in one way or another because we've shown that we need to in the documents here. The next policy is working with the Port of Morrow and other regional partners to support industrial growth. 1C is the cities shall cluster hyperscale data centers to minimize infrastructure and land needs. So that's really about thinking long term about where these very large facilities are going to be located and trying to not necessarily take them one at a time and deal with them individually, but think about them kind of as a group of land uses that are going to need to be accommodated. And 1D, this is kind of what Don was mentioning earlier. The city shall protect sites brought into the UGB for specific employment uses, such as data centers, for those uses through policy, through annexation agreements, development code, and or other means. So that means if the city says we need X number of acres for data centers, brings that land in, that land can't easily just turn into a Costco, for example. It needs to be for those data centers. Next slide. Sorry, did you say something?
No, Sam is our resident firefighter, and his radio is talking to him.
Okay, gotcha. Next slide.
It's not the voices in your head, I promise.
It's the voices in your head.
It's the voices in his head.
The second goal is to incentivize new business development and attract new industries prominent in the region. So this is the first policy is to evaluate and update as necessary the North Boardman urban renewal economic development incentives to attract interest in key development areas. The second one is to utilize the enterprise zone, the Columbia River Enterprise Zone along Olson Road and near the Port of Morrow interchange to attract developers. And finally, to leverage other existing public finance and economic development tools as deemed necessary and effective to achieve economic and employment goals. So this is about attracting new business. Number 3, goal 3, strengthen Boardman's position as a regional hub for industry and commerce. This is a goal that's a lot about kind of partnerships. So 3A, promote public-private partnerships with key partners, including the Chamber of Commerce, Port of Morrow, Greater Eastern Oregon Development Corporation, and Business Oregon. 3B, ensure sufficient infrastructure and support systems to sustain business development by collaborating with Port of Morrow, Oregon, ODOT, GEODC, and other regional partners. So focusing on infrastructure in particular. 3C, facilitating the safe movement of people, goods, and services throughout the region by identifying joint planning efforts and shared funding opportunities for key infrastructure investments based on the TSP, Transportation System Plan. So linking this kind of economic development goals to other infrastructure pieces like the TSP. Next slide. Goal 4 is to attract and strengthen a skilled and technical workforce. Partnering with Blue Mountain Community College and other schools and universities with training programs for kind of specialized IT information technology workforce pipeline. The second policy there, aiming to maximize workforce recruitment from surrounding jurisdiction, using marketing efforts to do that. Again, related to taking advantage of the data center activity to promote local workforce development. And the last policy there, attract employees by supporting development of a variety of housing options and other community amenities consistent with housing needs analysis, Parks Master Plan, and strategic plan. So again, looking at the role of economic development in the economic chapter here in context with housing and other pieces of work that the city's doing. And next slide, I think 5 is the number of goals that we have here. Can you go to the next
Andrew,
slide?
while I'm
Yep.
thinking of it, we should turn in that last policy, we should say housing capacity analysis instead of housing needs analysis.
Yeah, good point.
I think I made that mistake earlier, just so everyone knows, we've called these housing needs analysis for decades and decades, and now they're called housing capacity analysis, which is a better name, but we're still getting used to it. Yeah, slide.
Good point. And goal 5, respond to economic development opportunities with speed and flexibility. It's always a goal, but as evidenced by all that we're doing, things are changing pretty rapidly. So policy 5A, the city shall identify and implement opportunities to increase staff capacity through interagency or interdepartmental collaboration. And 5B, the city shall update development standards as needed to allow for these employment uses and ensure that development permitting is expeditious and efficient. So making sure that the city is as well positioned as possible to be able to respond to new economic development opportunities through staffing and development code. All right. Is this the last one? Can you check the next slide here? Yeah. So let's go back to the comp plan there. So that's the set of comprehensive plan policies that we've recommended. Again, we think these are going to get adopted as part of the EOA. So if you have any thoughts about what's on the table now or things that might be missing, then now would be a good time to discuss.
Yeah, so PAC members, there's a couple of you on Zoom. Omar, you still there? Any comments? Just trying to pull in some other folks in the room. Jennifer, any thoughts? Sam, I know you're here for the chief, and the chief's here because he's on the chamber board, but you both are planning commission members, so this is eventually going to come in front of you. Is there anything there that piques your interest or that you find kind of spot on with the conversations we've been having, or are we off the mark at all? So, our current comprehensive plan, in reality, it's, even though it says it's had updates since then, it probably is at best a 1997 document that is almost 30 years old. And by the time it gets adopted, it will be it will be 29 years old when we get to adoption next year, as when we do this as part of the big overall comprehensive plan update. And that's a lot of time that has passed and a huge amount of growth that has happened. And I just want to make sure that these goals are really responsive to where we think we are, and even more importantly, how we grow. Because I think the policies can address some of the comments and questions that Debbie has raised. And those are the things that I want to make sure we're comfortable with and that we make sure we achieve. So again, Omar, I think if you're still on, if you have any questions about what you saw, and then Jennifer or Sam, any thoughts?
No, when I was reviewing the material before the meeting, it looked like is good projections.
Mhm.
And so I think it's gonna account for that, at least that 1 year adoption period.
Yep.
For that unaccounted for growth, but.
Yep.
No, I think it's on point.
I agree. Okay, cool.
Could we go to the slide on the workforce?
This workforce slide, I think that's the 4th slide, goal 4. Yep.
So there's, again, it's in here, it looks like it's pretty directed at data centers. And is that what how you want it to be? You know, is there a way to add other technical training, skill development in the region for workforce? You know, where it just seems very focused on data centers. So is that the intention, or?
No, it's not the intention. Again, the EOA relative to the 625 acres is a targeted industry conversation, but the overall EOA is about employment lands, commercial lands, industrial lands, and you can almost in some respects, kind of put you could almost say there's 3 categories of what they're looking at. They're looking at commercial lands, they're looking at industrial lands from a general perspective, and then they're looking at data centers from a very targeted perspective. So no, if there's something in there that
You go back, both the first and second one really speak to just information technology, and then information technology sector for data centers in the second one.
Yeah, maybe we can change policy 4B to say data centers, and pick a couple of the other kind of growth sectors for in the EOA. I think healthcare is probably something worth mentioning, calling out, and maybe 1 or 2 others. It does say other employment gaps, but yeah, we can name a few more, so it's not quite so data center focused.
And
Yeah.
maybe Andrew, also from that perspective, pull in something around the commercial sector. I'm not quite sure how to, because this is about attract and strengthen a skilled and technical workforce. But again, we have an emerging healthcare sector with Good Shepherd. And so again, it's not that they're not skilled or technical, but is there a way to pull that in? I'm trying to think about some of the other things that may be emerging. Construction,
Yeah,
I know that there
construction,
are
manufacturing.
there are organizations out there who are trying to figure out how to streamline the trades.
Mhm.
That's clearly a skilled and technical workforce that is less technology. Well, there's not a lot of technology in everything we do these days, but it's less technology when you think about data centers and more about, I mean, I actually have somebody who's involved in some of those projects in the room, but I can't let her speak yet because we don't have a public comment opportunity. Hopefully we'll have a couple minutes at the end. But yeah, I think there's some Debbie,
I think
good call.
I think in both A and B we can do some more wordsmithing and broaden that a bit.
Yeah,
I love 4C, so.
yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay, perfect. All right.
Okay.
I'm still gonna pick on Omar one more time. Omar, are you still on?
Yes, Carla, I've been listening. Yes, I have
Cool.
no comments at this time.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. If something should come up, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Yes, understood. Thank you, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's
So-
great. So those are good comments. I definitely hear that we need to make sure that we're reflecting all the potential types of growth and sectors and make sure we're not just too focused on data centers. That makes sense. Okay. Anything else jumping out about any of these goals that people would like to comment on or ask about? Any?
I have a question about schools and churches and those kind of things. Are they in the plan?
So those are actually included in the housing capacity analysis. Typically, we are waiting for the new rule to come from the state, but traditionally, those are actually part of the residential study, and you find that there's an additional allowance or an additional finding of need for those types of institutional uses like churches, schools, parks, those types of things to serve the residents.
And the parks thing, as far as need, has been really clearly delineated in the Parks Master Plan. So we can check off parks, I think, pretty well. But I would agree, the schools and the church component will be that kind of falls out of the housing capacity analysis. Whether it's in the rules or not, we'll note it. And so I've got a couple folks who can capture those thoughts because they'll be working with us on the housing capacity analysis. So
I just thought a crazy idea here, so you gotta get where my head's going, is because there's schools that are taking the high school students and they're identifying what their skills and strengths and future dreams are. And then taking them into STEM or construction or trades, or getting them involved in that training in, in senior high school.
Right.
And so I don't think we have the infrastructure for that kind of thing, but I think it's very much needed. So where would that go? Is that help you or hurt you with your urban growth boundary? And is that a part of what you could speak to as you're making your pitch, is what I guess.
So Brendan, maybe Brendan and Andrew, Meg, all of you, maybe there is a place in number 4 to more clearly delineate that connection from the traditional K-12 system into that, even that junior senior program into the trade school or into that more technical side. I mean, maybe there's something we can do with one of these policies to draw those pieces out.
Yeah, I mean, these policies are for the city itself. So to what extent does the city want to play a role in that activity? And so I think for A,
That's
we've
true.
said, work with, we say other schools or universities and training programs.
And I'm thinking more just in terms of the urban growth boundary, is that part in these institutions?
Are those things that
In-
would go
in-
into?
do they need more land?
That
Is
you
that the-
say,
Right,
we
do they need
have the
more
land available for these things if.
Well, the high school site is constrained when you consider that that's currently housing the high school and the junior high. And how and where do they grow the next junior high? And if they should ever split that facility based on the growth we're having, where would a junior high go? I mean, again, assuming they would leave the high school there and relocate the junior high. That's an interesting
It should
comment.
be in the 20-year plan, I would think.
Yeah, it very well be. I don't have real clarity on what the school district's plan is, but maybe that's something that city manager Brandon Hammond can help inform what he may know or conversations he has or could have. Again, I don't know that it's a change in a goal here, but I'll try to see what I can find out in the
as
short
far as
term.
the kind of UGB process. So we're doing a UGB expansion for the City of Sisters and small community. We've talked to their school superintendent, and as part of just those conversations, they said, yes, I think given this new residential growth, we do think we would need a new school site. And so that's an actual like 15 acres that we've tacked on to the land need for employment and for housing. So it's not exactly underneath either of those headers, but there's an opportunity when you actually go out for a UGB expansion to think about other types of land uses that aren't covered in the EOA and the H&A. And I'm not sure, Don, if you have any thoughts about what level of documentation would be required from the school district or something if they said that they needed more land.
You're muted, Dawn.
That would be something I definitely would want to defer to Lee, my economic specialist. So I think that's hitting a little bit more in her category, as I'm more of a generalist. So,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
yeah, Andrew, if that's,
Noted.
I mean, or if that's something that we want to look at, I can definitely have Lee take a deeper dive into that question.
Yeah, I think it's more of a, parking lot issue for an eventual UGB request. So, like once that effort is underway, that'd be the time to look at school expansions.
I
Well, and
agree
I
with
think
that, or through the HCA process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more clearly connected to the HCA process and something that we could probably vet as well, if not better in the housing capacity analysis process. So I agree, it's clearly a parking lot issue. We'll flag it. And again, to Andrew and Meg, as we engage the HCA process with Meg in the lead, I'll ask you to parking lot it for that project. Okay.
Okay. Shall we move into just a couple of development code concepts, and then we can wrap
Please.
up and maybe have time for additional discussion? So
Yep.
again, this is a set of kind of code concepts related to issues that have been brought up as we've gone through the EOA effort, and maybe a little background about what the development code does. It has very specific development regulations that affect actual development applications, and Planning Commission usually is the arbiter of deciding whether a specific application meets the development code requirements. So these aren't really statements of policy. This is the way that policy gets implemented. There were some development code updates that happened through the transportation system plan, and I believe that included the sidewalk issue that we were talking about, Carla, just making sure that there's clear requirements for new sidewalks and new developments, things related to transportation kind of addressed there.
Yep.
And there will probably be, or there almost certainly will be development code updates, recommendations that come out of the housing capacity analysis and kind of housing issues as well. So we're really focused on just a couple of chapters that relate to employment zones and the definitions chapter, and looking at a couple of targeted items specifically related to data centers, and then concepts for a new mixed use zone if the city wants to see residential and commercial mixed use development either stacked on top of each other or next to each other on the same parcel. We've got some concepts drawn from other communities there. Next slide. So I'll just cover these pretty briefly. So the definitions chapter, because so much of the development activity is data centers, adding clear definitions for what a data center is, and separating out what a hyperscale data center is. Those terms, they change all the time, and so maybe they'll need an update in some number of years, but they're clearly pretty different scales of the same activity. So the regulations for a hyperscale data center, which probably be defined as over a certain acreage, might be different from something that's kind of smaller and might fit into a different context. So the commercial district is in chapter 2.2. There's a service center subdistrict that's part of the code today. We suggest making a data center subdistrict kind of in a similar vein, so that maybe some of these smaller data centers, should they be something that people want to be building, could go into a commercial district given a certain set of regulations about height and setbacks and kind of nuisance activity like noise and vibration, things like that. In the general industrial zone, I think data centers and hyperscale data centers make sense for the general industrial zone. That's probably the zoning designation that would be applied to new land that was brought into the UGB for those, but again with some kind of restriction to say that that new land is for data centers only. And then chapter 3.6 in your code has other standards, which address things like lighting, parking, visual aspects of development. So making a new section there for data centers, particularly related to noise, lighting, parking, architectural features, and especially when they're within a certain distance from residential areas. That's probably where you'd want to have more stringent regulations there. And there's a couple of sources cited in the memo for example bits of development code from organizations like the Urban Land Institute and others about what other communities are doing to put some of these types of regulations on to data centers in their communities. I think a lot of times you need to strike a balance of, are you over regulating a certain use because to the point where they don't actually want to locate in your community. I think in this case there's probably a lot of leverage that the city would have in terms of design, just because the fundamentals of like infrastructure and power and agglomeration are so strong in your community that you could probably get some kind of design features out of new developments without too much pushback, but that's just conjecture on my part.
Andrew,
Mhm.
Andrew, so I'm feeding off of Debbie's comment earlier about that landscaping component, and our landscaping standards fall in 3.2, I want to say.
I don't remember exactly the number right now.
I don't, it's not 3.1, and I don't think it's it's either 3.2 or 3.3. Given that, I would like to regulate less and encourage more. I mean, a part of my frustration with landscaping provisions is it always says you have to have so much hardscape and so much this and so much that. I would like to get away from that, but encourage more just buffer kind of and enhancement landscaping. The standard is for the amount of landscaping that we require in each of the zoning distinctive areas, commercial, industrials, just seems wonky to me too. Could I ask you and Meg to just maybe add a half a page about landscaping in here and our current standards and kind of how we get to good stuff?
Yeah, we
Would
can
that
take a look at
be an
that
appropriate request?
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, we can think about that, and not in terms of data centers specifically. You just mean in general, look at the landscaping standards, and we can see where they
Yes.
fall in terms of other peer communities, see if like the quantitative amount you require is in line with what we see elsewhere, and maybe have
Yep.
some other ideas. The balance, this is more the case with residential uses, but it's still good practice for commercial and industrial uses, is this having what they call clear and objective standards that aren't really subject to a whole lot of discretion
Yeah.
is that's nice, because there's no the outcome is a lot more assured if you were to go through the process. So even if it's not perfect, having a number on the page that will get you to a yes is nice to have. But sometimes we'll set up sort of a dual track system where you either meet exactly what the code says, or you can apply for a conditional use and say, this is how we're going to meet the intent of that in a better way, and that actually has discretion that planning commission will usually weigh in on. So yeah, we can take a look at landscaping standards in that light.
Yeah, that would be very much appreciated.
And do you want us to throw in comments now, or do you want us to hold comments until you're done? Just question, because I have something I want to bring up.
Comments now are fine.
So I think that I have concerns about creating more sub-districts, and specifically when we're targeting one industry. I think that getting away from sub-districts and going to more of a design standard or uses allowed, is kind of what I think would probably be better, because I mean, I don't know what the future of industry holds here. I don't know if data centers are gonna be around forever, and I would hate to create a sub-district that says, oh, this is allowed, you know, a data center sub-district. And quite frankly, in my time as a planner, I get really frustrated with sub-districts. Coming from Morrow County, there was all these overlay zones and these sub-districts and all these other things that were really targeted. And as industry has changed and the economy has changed, we've seen shifts in our area towards other industries. Morrow County has proven to be really resilient when it comes to economic growth. And so I think that's kind of where I land. And this is Stephanie. I don't know if I've popped up on camera, but this is Stephanie. So that's kind of my 2 cents, getting away from
So you
sub-districts.
prefer these things be, you know, an allowed use in the commercial district and then subject to specific standards that are listed somewhere?
Yeah, I think,
without making a new district or boundary or anything associated with them.
yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on that, instead of,
I would agree with that too, because we're making it look like we're doing it strictly for the data centers, and that's not the intent. And so as a citizen coming in, looking at it, you're thinking, oh, well, they're getting away with being able to do so many things that maybe the other commercial areas are not allowed to do. So by leaving one category, it's seems more neutral for everybody, not just specifically the data center.
Yeah, and you guys have targeted that the data center sub-district would be part of the commercial district. I think it should be part of the general, I mean, again, if we retain the sub-district, and I'm gonna defend why it may need to be a sub-district here in a second. But I think we want to make sure it ends up in the general industrial zone. There is currently a port industrial sub-district that I can't figure out where it's applied to. And I think it's just going to go away because I can't figure out where it's applied to. And the reason I say that in this instance, because of how data centers are being treated, and I'll potentially fall back on Dawn. So the EOA and regionally through DLCD, data centers are identified as a target industry. And when we create or allow, create or allow land to come in, like we do an urban growth boundary expansion, and they want to use this EOA to support their expansion because they are a targeted industry identified, i.e. data center, we have to delineate that property that comes in as land for data centers until such time that it's not, and then it's gonna have to go back through the planning process in 20 or 40 or 50 years, unless rules further change, to change that use. And that's just the nature of the targeted industries mechanism that DLCD uses. So I generally absolutely agree with both of you that I think the whole sub-district thing gets frustrating, and my intent is to figure out how to eliminate them completely in the residential zone. I'd like to figure out, I think the industrial zone is close to that, but I think we're going to have some definition for data centers based on the targeted industries component that DLCD is relying on. And in the commercial one, we've got like 4 sub-districts: tourist commercial, service center, regular commercial, and downtown commercial. And it gets confusing. And we are working with Cascadia partners on how to streamline those commercial sectors. So we may not see it here yet about how we streamline the commercial, but we are having that conversation with Cascadia on the development code provisions. So Dawn, Jennifer, you've got a question.
Yeah, so can we word that? So if we have to leave it in there, can we word it basically the same in each section so that people say, yeah, we still have this section, but they have to go by the same rules and the same standard as the industrial and the commercial? So that, yes, it's still there and we realize it's there, but they're not getting away with anything special, because that seems to be the community negative, is that AWS and these data centers get away with more than what a different business would be allowed to do.
Well, and I think
Yeah,
that's why
I
it's
think the
really
intent-
important when we have the conversation about data centers. I think this landscaping component relative to data centers is probably something that should be more robust for the data centers than for other industries potentially. Because look at most of our other industry is in the industrial park. But when you look at where we're going to expand for industrial use, it's not in the industrial park. That land is committed or already zoned that way. So we're looking at new lands for these activities, particularly the targeted, if we, again, going back to that definition of targeted industries, I think we definitely want to make sure that we have a conversation about what that landscaping standard is. So, and I'm going to suggest, Dawn, if you've got a quick input, if you want to add anything. Otherwise, I want to suggest if we can figure out how to wrap this discussion up, I want to have at least a couple of minutes to talk about cemetery site redevelopment. So.
Maybe you could
Muted.
rephrase what you wanted to hear from Don.
No,
Oh, just
sorry,
about how to.
I was having a hard time unmuting. Sorry. Thanks, Andrew. I don't know what I was doing, but so Carla, you are correct. And again, and Stephanie, I hear what you're saying about overlay zones, and it's just a lot for a planner to have to, it's like, oh my gosh, what overlay zone is this with? But the rule is pretty specific or very specific when it comes to these data centers in terms of if you're using a targeted industry to expand an urban growth boundary for that targeted industry, those properties need to be utilized for that use. And I think just to kind of give you a little quick example, I don't want to take up too much time. Situations like this had happened before for an industry that, we're doing a GB expansion for, well, let's just say data centers. And before the rule came in and was modified, you'd have that somebody, and I want to say, I don't know if Brendan mentioned it or Andrew mentioned it, oh wait, that's not going to work. We want a Costco. And so that's really not an industrial use. It's more of a commercial use, even though you could potentially look at it as, big boxes a little bit more on the industrial side. But what it does is it's securing those lands for industrial lands and for the targeted industry that's been identified. So they do have to have that into modifying that. So let's say you do have one and like I said before, is, things change and the, economics and, the fabric of the community, it changes, and that's not a use that's going to be something that's coming into Boardman. Then that would be, modification and or a new EOA to be produced to identify that changing thought process.
Yeah. So I hear you guys. Believe me, I'm on the same page as you are.
Well, is there another way to capture the targeted industry component? Say, because we have that port industrial zone. Is there another way to capture it where it's not just specific to data centers where they're an allowed use within that zone, or does it have to be only the targeted industry?
My understanding of how DLCD is implementing the targeted industry is it's pretty narrowly defined. If our EOA says 625 acres for data centers, then as we add 625 acres, we add those 625 acres for data centers. If somebody comes, something changes and all of a sudden we're going to start creating the newest widget there has ever been in the world, and all of a sudden they need 500 acres in Boardman to build a plant, we'd have to come back and do some kind of amendment to this EOA to address the newfangled widgets and change that targeted industry to the widget industry. That's my understanding of how they're implementing the Goal 9 requirements around targeted industries.
So does it have to say data center, or can it say specific for targeted industries and the rules for targeted industries, so that later on in the future, if it goes from AWS to your widget, whatever, we wouldn't have to rewrite the rule to say it's strictly for this new upcoming thing, but it's for the targeted industry at the time.
Yeah, I think that could work.
That's not my understanding, actually. I think it does have to be for the specific target industry identified.
Okay. It is what it is. We'll live with it, we'll work with it, and we'll figure it out. Andrew and Meg will help us, so.
I think, yeah, I think this is the last of the slides on development code concepts here. So Oh, sorry,
Oh.
just real briefly, mixed use zones. So we did a bit of a look at some other communities that have mixed use zones that might be appropriate for Cascadia partners and others to look at as you're drafting specific language. The things that are addressed are kind of the mix of uses allowed. So what types of residential are allowed? Office, commercial, low impact, light industrial. These are typical things to see in a mixed use zone. The built form, so how high are the buildings, how are they oriented to the street? Usually these are intended to be kind of more walkable communities, so having buildings close to the street with low setbacks is desirable. First floor requirements, like making that an active space with commercial uses versus you can put whatever you want on the first floor, and then parking requirements are a concern there. And then also how is the public realm addressed? Landscaping requirements, block length requirements, if you're actually building a large enough development to get new public streets in there. So we provided some examples and summaries of those examples from the City of Sandy, City of Sisters, North Plains, and Gladstone. If any of these, strike home to you, or if you take a little Google Earth kind of view of any of these areas to see what's actually been developed in those zones, and see what makes sense for Boardman, we could perhaps dive in a little further towards which ones of those seem most appropriate. But it's kind of just an informational item for you folks.
What about signage and colors of buildings and stuff? Do you get into those weeds?
So there's actually some color in one of those examples provided, and those examples are of mixed use. It's really about how you incorporate residential and commercial uses together. So there's a little bit in there about color. The city of Boardman currently doesn't really have any color requirements in any of our code. We haven't chosen to go there. But given the whole, everybody needs to paint the Amazon buildings, again, I don't remember which one of the examples, but they do touch on color.
And signage, because I know that,
Yeah,
you know, where it's located and how big it is, and it blocks something else. And all
I mean,
that.
like
Right.
wayfinding for like a downtown district, that kind of thing.
Is it, yeah, like even in some communities, they have, the signage has to, you know, have a kind of historic look, or they're trying to go with the theme. They don't want some neon sign in an area that's kind of for.
So on the signage part relative to wayfinding, that also emerged in the Parks Master Plan. And so there's a suggestion that we do a wayfinding project. That did not get into signage in the commercial or industrial zones. Thanks, Sam. Oh, he'll be back. Okay. We didn't ask for them to talk about signage, but that's something that we could certainly put forward to Cascadia partners, or something we could take on as a city. Our current signage regulations are absolutely horrid. So yeah, good parking lot issue. Yep. Okay. Sorry, Brendan, I knew we should have gone 2.5 or 3 hours. So I think the last item on the agenda is the cemetery site redevelopment, and I don't know, in 8 minutes, we're gonna get a whole lot about that, but yeah, it's basically from, you can see on the map where the cemetery is, and then kind of the whole undeveloped other half of the cemetery, but the cemetery district owns all the way to Olson. And that's really underutilized property. When the city established the North Urban Renewal District, this area was specifically identified under the category of blight. And if you drive by it and take a really good look, you'll understand why that came out of that conversation relative to the North Urban Renewal. And so I asked them to kind of think about this as part of the EOA. So Brendan, that's all I'm gonna say. I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so shifting gears, but I think kind of related to the mixed use discussion that Andrew was just involved in. This site is not, what we're talking about now is not part of the technical EOA document. This was another part of our project scope that was added on to look at this specific area and do a brief, to the point, kind of feasibility memo about what might happen in this area. And so as we were discussing this with Carla, the thought was, okay, maybe the advisory committee, being the local experts, should give their insight and thoughts on what might work here. So a lot of this in the buildable lands inventory was identified as either vacant or partially vacant. There's a lot of older uses in here. There's some of these are developed, but there are other areas that are either an old use or, most of the property is maybe just covered with storage or something. So anyway, it's the tax lots that are identified in blue here. This is the cemetery. They still have half of the green area here that they aren't using yet for burials. And so really even the brown half of their parcel all the way over to Olson Road is sort of this area that has, some potential, and it's got urban renewal resources. So we just kind of wanted to gather ideas with the brief time we have left of what might work there. It's near the rec center. It's near the Sage Center. It has residential uses to the west and the south. This is the zoning around there. So that site again is this located with the black boundary. But you'll see in terms of zoning, it's got residential zoning and even multifamily zoning on the south side of it and all along the west side. So it's this sort of transition area. So I think what we've talked about is potential mixed use, potential to have a different kind of maybe commercial / light industrial / flex use type space located here that better represents the transition from the residential to the industrial areas. But I guess I just want to draw out any thoughts that we have on that, and Carla can add some more about what she's been thinking for this area, and just really kind of a sounding board at this point on what people think of that idea and what could happen in this location.
I'd really like to hear from the advisory committee members and be the silent person here.
Does this property have a view of the river?
Limited.
Not much, because then you've got it kind of goes uphill, even if you were like 2-story or something. Okay, and then there's a real need, I feel like, for additional places to eat. Bakeries, even restaurants, that kind of thing. But also that area is close to the high school and other housing area there. So it seems like it would be good for some additional housing, but mixed in with some easy places to go to eat or get a snack or do those other kinds of things that people that make the community a more livable place. Maybe it's a nail place to get your nails done or whatever else. So I know that there's some industrial stuff, but as you've already pointed out, there's that you're close to the Port of Morrow there where industry could be, but what services does industry need that would be close to them on that road to get to for a lunch break or a.
I agree with what you're saying. I like the idea of kind of a mixed use like that. I mean, we have a couple of established businesses there. There is one restaurant there, and then there's I know there's a welding shop and a real estate agency, and I can't.
CID, it has their offices in there.
Yeah, some associated uses there, but having something that could benefit maybe the high school nearby, the apartments nearby. And then as development happens across the way on Columbia, there could be several things that some services that might be available to those folks. And then near the rec center as well,
Brenda has her hand up. Brenda, unmute yourself.
So a couple of things that I'm thinking, it would be nice if Boardman had something like, or was able to have like a little butcher shop or a small place like that where you could get fresh meats. Maybe even to serve some of the people that are coming in to and from the port area, maybe a small gas station that's not on Main Street. And I do like the idea of some mixed use housing, maybe even a small convenience store or something that would serve some of the people that live right there. I don't know if that is too many things like that, but in Boardman, but it would be nice to have something that maybe is a more convenient for those industrial employees.
Yeah. So I will say the property just to the south of this, that the city has recently purchased the Susie Frederickson property. So it starts at Olson and again, north of the little parcels along front. So it's those 3 parcels right there. One more, yep, those 3. And then the city already owns the parcel where the skate park is. Next year, we will be doing a fairly large infrastructure project where we will be building Boardman Avenue to Olson. We'll be connecting 4th. We're working with the church to acquire the right of way for 3rd. 3rd will be connected. And then there'll be a stub to connect to this property on the north side of that property that's going to be redeveloped. It is multifamily. That is certainly our target, although the property on the very far east side between Olson and that property line there, where those 3 storage units are, that will be redeveloped. We may change the zoning. We may leave it light industrial and incorporate some kind of industrial commercial uses there to facilitate the again, the mixed use, the housing, the multifamily housing that's happening. But I'm where you are. I'd love to see some mixed use, 3-story buildings, potentially residential on the top 2 floors, nice commercial opportunities on the bottom. And I think all of the uses that you guys have identified are really appropriate to that property. A small convenience store, maybe a gas station that could serve kind of the working population in the port, bakery, nail salon. I mean, they are all needed in Boardman. So I think creating, and again, they provided us some mixed use standards that we want to deploy, not just here, but in our other commercial areas in Boardman. There's new rules that say you basically have to allow housing in commercial areas. We need to figure out how we actually manage and do that. And so those are all kind of the stuff that we're working with, again, Cascadia Partners. So this is all information that we're going to feed to the comp plan and development code provisions that are happening as kind of a capstone to all of this. So, Brenda, did you have another question or? Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure you got everything in. I know we're close to 11. I appreciate everybody being here. Any last good of the order? Anybody has?
We get a couple more folks on the sign-in sheet.
Oh, yeah, we need to capture everybody on the sign-in sheet. So if you didn't sign in, please do. We captured everybody on the Zoom call. So Brendan, any final words in conclusion?
I just want to say thanks also for everyone for being here and sticking through to the end. Appreciate it. I know it's a long meeting. And I just want to reiterate, if you have any comments, questions, thoughts on any material, thoughts on the cemetery site, please get those to us. You can send those to Carla, who will forward those to us. So please, any additional thoughts on anything we've talked about is greatly appreciated, and we'd love to hear it. But thanks everyone very much, and for participating in the advisory committee. We'll keep you informed of the public process as it goes forward.
So my last question back to you, Brendan. I see Andrew's probably already signed off. I don't know if Meg is still on the line.
I'm still here.
Oh, perfect. Meg, is there a way that we can kind of capture this cemetery site redevelopment thoughts in your development code memo as well?
I can definitely check with Andrew. I'll include it in our notes for him and I'll touch base with him after the fact and then we'll follow up with you.
Okay, that sounds great. I just don't want to lose this conversation. I don't know quite where to put it. It's not necessarily EOA specific, but I do think it's development code specific. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put it, I have it reflected in the notes and I'll make sure to touch base with Andrew on that.
perfect, perfect. Okay,
Thank
the
you.
folks in the room, any questions? I didn't give Randy or Angie a time to comment because they're not on the PAC. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the meeting and end the recording. And if anybody wants to hang out for another 5-10 minutes, please do so. Steph, would you hit the stop button on the recording?
Yeah, you might have to direct me. There's a
Up.
glare.
Slide the mouse down to Sam.
Okay, I can't quite see that side very good over there, so.